Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Welcome to the Global Marketing Show. Today's tidbit from Rapport International is going to educate you a little bit. It's a little history about language. So many linguists believe that language originated around 100 BC, so many years ago, which makes sense because humans need to communicate. Early languages evolved, changed, branched out, and went extinct. Yet one of the oldest languages still spoken today originated around the 10th century BC, and it's spoken by over 9 million people in the world today. Can you guess what that language is? Certainly let me know if you got it right. But the language, if you didn't know, is Hebrew. It's the official language of Israel. So I started out with a tidbit about education today, because we've got somebody who has a business in education. He's got a business in exchange programs. He's had his hand in running hotels, and he runs a digital marketing agency. And all of this touches on international. Steve Lowy says he's worked in hotels for many years, and he founded Umi Digital to support the hotel and travel sector. He's worked with all sorts of companies, from game reserves in the Congo, which is where I want to go, to luxury hotels in London. So, Steve, welcome to the Global Marketing Show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear your story because, of course, it touches on so many things international. So why don't you talk me through a little bit about where you got started and then what led you into all these different paths that you are in now?
Sure, yeah. So I studied hospitality and tourism at university, did hospitality and tourism management, and had a real passion actually for food, which I still do, mainly cooking, but sort of dreamt of opening a restaurant one day. After university, I worked a bit, and then I went traveling around the world for a year. So I went through Southeast Asia, lived and worked in Australia for 6 months, went through the South Pacific, across America, and got a bug for hospitality more broadly, and obviously travel, because that was really what I was doing most of the time. And ended up running a backpackers hostel in London, which had over 500 beds in a very international market. So that, at the age of 24, was my first management role in accommodation. And then from there, I set up my own budget hotel chain, where we ended up opening in London, Brighton, and Moscow. So when you talk about language, that's a whole different ball game. And as we grew that hotel brand, I'd learned a lot from doing the hostel. It was an Australian brand, and they were for a youth travel product, they were very heavy branded. It was very clever. And the importance of brand, even if it was a small brand, and the importance of marketing, particularly digital, was really an era, so 2004 to 2007, where things really changed. I think people's travel trends changed, how they booked flights and accommodation, where they were doing more stuff online rather than through a travel agent in person. And sort of self-taught myself SEO and paid AdWords, paid search at that time, because I felt it was a really cost-effective way of getting more business and not paying commission to travel agents, basically. And the hotel brand, which was called Umi Hotels, it was really centered around, one, giving young people opportunities to work in the hotel, attracting a younger crowd at that sort of budget level, but also a great focus on direct business, people booking direct through your own website, which you will see today. All the big hotel brands shout about book direct, book direct, book direct. In reality, it was much easier to do then than it is now, because there's more people now who are skilled in online marketing than there were, 2007 to 2010. But when we launched in Moscow, I realized I couldn't just do the marketing myself with an intern from the coffee shop at the hotel in London. And we created a digital out of that, with initially to be the marketing department for Umi Hotels. But increasingly, I was being probably too generous with giving people advice in a pub or a cocktail party or a conference. And we decided that we could monetize that. And then we kept a lot of the core brand beliefs, as we did with Umi Digital, or with Umi Hotels, which was giving young people opportunities. So our CEO of Umi Digital now is a former intern who worked as an intern 6 years ago. He's running the company. I'm sort of chairman of that, and also basically driving direct business and giving that opportunity. So that's how I got into it. And I guess with the hostel, we had 500 units to sell a day, 500 beds. And I really just loved digital marketing. I loved all the data that you could get, even though it was quite minuscule at the time. Google Analytics hadn't really launched in the UK yet. It was a very different world with regards to digital marketing. And I sort of seemed to get it, seemed to understand it and just have always really enjoyed it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and a 500-bed hostel backpackers hostel is huge. So that's a lot of beds to fill. Luckily, you had a good location for that.
Yeah, we were in Paddington, pretty central London, so that was good. But yeah, it was tough, and I learned a lot about youth travel and how even then young people travel and booked, and now doing the educational piece. Although young people book and travel completely differently to when I did, or even the generation after me. I backpacked around the world with a Lonely Planet guide.
Yes.
When I left the UK, Google wasn't even launched in the UK properly.
Yeah.
Everyone used Yahoo. And when I came back a year later, I was using Yahoo and everyone was like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, it's, and I guess that was my realization point of how things were changing and how things were going to change even quicker going forwards. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I remember using the book. It wasn't The Lonely Planet, but it was a different one. And you'd show up and then you'd look through the list to see what was there to find your hostel. Now it's completely different.
It is. And I think from a marketing perspective, one of the challenges, the things I still like to do, I am one of those people who searches, you're told, you're invited, you're going to a restaurant, you search the menu in advance.
Mm-hmm.
You take away that excitement. And I think that has actually put more pressure on hospitality businesses, hotels, restaurants, and so forth, because you don't have, if you're a luxury hotel, there was huge amounts of excitement and mystique. You'd see a little advert. Now you turn up, you've seen a video, you've seen the drone footage. You have to surprise in different ways. And so I think when I started out, it was easier to surprise. And I think as long as they're good surprises, I think we all like surprises. We like the sense of adventure because humans do. And I think that's changed the dynamic in the relationship between the customer journey and the customer experience when they arrive at that destination, whether it be a local restaurant or a hotel abroad.
Okay, so let's go back to you. You opened a hotel in Moscow. Why Moscow? And what did you run into with the language issues there?
Yes, so it was a very modern story. In 2009, I got a message on Facebook from a friend from school who I hadn't seen in probably 8 or 9 years. And he said, look, I'm living in Moscow. Me and a couple of partners are opening up a small hotel. We love what you're doing with Umi Hotels. We've been featured on CNN and we've got some really good PR. And would you be interested in helping us? And, this is pre-Umi Digital, where I realized you can't just help everyone. Someone's got to charge. I actually flew over to Moscow for 24 hours, 48 hours in the middle of their winter. Being very British, we're not very good at dressing for the cold. I turned up with no overcoat and I didn't check the temperature. And I just found it pretty amazing. Hoping that one day I could be on a podcast and say that I'd opened a hotel in Moscow, which I now.
Your dream has come true.
The dream has come true. It was a very small hotel, 10 bedrooms, about a 10-minute walk from Red Square. So amazing location. And in Moscow, I don't know if you've been or heard much about it. Obviously, we're hearing a lot of bad stuff at the moment, which is also not as surprising as one thinks. Was that there was very little budget accommodation in central Moscow, particularly the sort of the tourist areas. And so, the Hyatt there, when we went, it was like $1,000 a night. The rates were very high. There just wasn't that much westernized stock. There was a lot of old communist hotels and so forth. So I just thought it was really interesting. So we created pretty much a sort of soft brand partnership agreement, similar to how Best Western do it with a lot of their hotels. And we created a hotel. And so we did the website. I did all the training. we set up all the internal technology. And what was interesting from a language perspective is, one, I'm dyslexic, so learning languages is really hard unless you immerse yourself. So when I worked in restaurants when I was younger, I picked up lots of bad words in lots of different languages from just being there, not from reading in a book. I can't learn off that. And interestingly, the target market wasn't as Russian as one would have thought, but it was certainly a challenge, particularly at that time where you didn't have automatic Google Translate and all the other tools that you have now to make user experience online better. And so we had to really be clever with how we did that. And also what we found at the time, and a lot of the business transactions we did there, and some of it included working with Russian travel agents sending people to the UK, was I often had to do it via a translator. And that's something that, being from the English speaking world, and I'm sure you've had it, Wendy, that you often don't even think about language where you go anywhere because everyone assumes everyone speaks English. But in Russia, that certainly wasn't the case. And depending on the transaction or the deal we were looking to do, some people felt very uncomfortable doing it in English. And so therefore you had to do it through a translator in Russian, and therefore you had to have that trust. And we say things very differently. I always tell the story of the hotel didn't actually have its own catering facilities, but we had a cafe next door. And there's this great cafe, and I went there one morning after we'd done the deal, and I was preparing for a day of training the staff on technology and marketing and various other things. And I said, "Oh, good morning," to the waitress. And she said, "It's not a good morning." I went, "Okay." So it's snowing, it's cold. So, right, okay. And that immediately, from a cultural perspective, is why sometimes people have challenges with Google Translate, is when you translate, you have to translate in the local culture and dialect as well as the actual words. And that is something that I learned a lot from working with people in Russia. It's a very different culture and way of doing hospitality.
That's a fantastic story, because that's very similar to the American "how are you?" Or "how are you doing today?" Or it's people say it, but they don't really want an answer. Right there, you said "good morning."
I was told.
Contradiction. Yeah.
I
So
sat,
go ahead.
I sat having my coffee, feeling like I've been told off. So yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me more a little bit about digital and where you're using Google Translate and where you're using professional translators now.
Yeah. So I think over the years, I think this is a global problem. A lot of people have lost the ability to write good content, create, I think photography and video and everything else has become a lot easier for people, and people have got a lot better because of iPhones and other devices. Visual content has actually got way better than when we launched digital back in 2010. I remember some of the early days that, hotels used to always, if it was a hotel with a small bedroom, all you got is photos of it with a shiny tap. Yeah. The internet was easier to trick people in some ways. And I think people probably read more as well as people used to write more. And so I think now there's a great importance put on video and interactive and photography and social media with regards to the visual part of content. So I think when I started out, we used to work with translators, particularly for Umi hotels. Our target markets, apart from Americans, were France, Spain, and Germany. And we would get core content as part of that journey for a customer from finding us to wanting to book, making sure that it made sense. So it wasn't a pure Google Translate translation, it was an actual translation of how an Italian or a Spaniard or a Frenchman would search for something. So, hotel doesn't always translate to hotel. It's different in different countries, particularly when you look at hostels, it means very different things in different countries too. So it was very important. But one of the things we did when we created Umi Hotels was really try and understand the customer journey and who our customer was. So the way that in 2008, once we were, I think, on our fourth iteration of our website then, and I didn't have an agency, of my own. So we were spending quite a lot of money on web design then. Because in 2007, they launched the iPhone. Steve Jobs launched the iPhone. And so immediately people's ways of searching and reading changed. And so I think from 2007 onwards, people's attention span has dipped. And therefore, where you are today is that translation has to be relevant to what they're looking for immediately. And if it is about booking a room, when they get to book a room, it needs to have a similar flow and experience to what the content was. Within the hotel sector, the tech stack is not always integrated. And what that means is if you go to a lot of hotel websites, you'll be redirected out of the website to a booking software. Mm-hmm. So it's sometimes a completely different experience, even today, where it doesn't feel like you're booking on that website. You're on a phone. We had technical issues earlier. Even with that, you'll lose interest. You'll go onto booking.com, you'll go onto Expedia, you'll know it's saved through the app. So from a translation perspective, it's really important to think about how, if you are putting translations onto their website and someone has searched l'Hôtel Londra rather than London, is once they've gotten to that page, the landing page is translated and it's true translation rather than Google Translate overlay. That when they get to the booking experience, if that is what you're trying to get them to do, that there is a flow of that booking and content pattern. What is also interesting within hotels is that in the UK alone, there's probably about 100 to 120 booking engines on offer to hotels.
Wow.
Easily. So that's one country. You times that regionally or globally, and it means that it's, if you're an independent hotel, you have great choice. Some will go for the cheapest. Some will be more marketing focused and feel about the ones that integrate better. Some say they've got artificial intelligence. Some have payment gateways. And so it's hard for the hotelier, but it's also really hard for a consumer because often you don't have a consistent feel when you're looking around. What I also think is that sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with it, there's plenty of industries that are the same, where actually using a online travel agent, booking.com or Expedia, as your main source of traffic, if you feel you don't have the skills or the budgets to invest in your own translations and so forth, is that paying 15 to 20% commission through an online travel agent may be a better solution from a business perspective. I don't believe that, because I think you can get better ROI doing stuff yourself. But almost going back to the original question, translation should be part of a bigger marketing concept and making sure that the technology and that customer journey flows through. If you have a mid-range hotel, I know in America, particularly with the big brands, you've got so many different ranges. You've got upscale, upper upscale, side scale, there's every scale of type of hotels. But let's say, the average three-star hotel, your market will be potentially groups, potentially young couples, potentially young families, potentially tourists from abroad, potentially business people. You've got a really wide mix. At that price point, most people just want to book. And therefore, whether it's translation or technology or however that flow is, you want to make it as easy for someone to book. Mm-hmm. If you've got a luxury resort on a beach in the Caribbean, there's a lot of dreaming. And because of the high transaction value, people may actually want to email or phone or live chat and talk about a lot. It's not just a pure transactional relationship with that customer. Mm-hmm. So you may need to look from a translation perspective at a lot more elaborate content. So again, I guess Mexican resorts, although they get a lot of customers from probably the UK as well as the US, there's also great affinity from the Spanish-speaking markets. So if they have, let's say, this beautiful luxury resort has a beautiful website, but they also have a wonderful What's On magazine or downloadable magazine, and it's only available in English, then you're not interacting and you're not dreaming with that Spanish speaker. They may speak English, but they'll probably feel more comfortable speaking in their or reading in their first language. So I think it's a lot of the translation piece goes back to what your product is and understanding the customer and making sure that all matches up.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to think about that way, in that specific industry of how you have to segment out. And it goes back to knowing your buyer and your buyer's journey and what you're going to need in there. So explain to me a little bit more about, I have a small boutique hotel and I translate my website. The buyer goes through it. So you've done a good quality translation. The ROI is going to be there. You've optimized for search. Now they click through to the booking site. How can they control the translations to make sure it's similar and consistent all the way through?
So that's very much dealing with that booking software company. It's often third party. I mean, there's some huge global companies, but there's also a lot of smaller regional ones. And it's kind of amazing. With Umi Digital, I've seen hotels that spend a fortune on all sorts of marketing. And then you get to book and you can't book, And so there's no point. Amazon don't do big adverts on the sides of their trucks. So you just like the truck. They do it so you buy something.
Right.
Hotels are way better. I mean, they've been lagging behind, but the whole understanding, the ability to track ROI through AdWords, through other sort of paid search, through even, organic search, and whether they're coming through an Italian page and whether people are buying in different languages, you can see. And I think most hotels are a lot sharper on that. But I think, and what's happened over probably the last 3 or 4 years, if you forget COVID, was that I think because they've got sharper, they've challenged the technology providers more. This doesn't work for me. I remember we built our own booking engine in 2010 for the Umi Hotel piece, and we had a built-in booking engine. We had, which you can't do anymore, but it was I could have an average purchase price per keyword, which you can sort of do, but with GDPR regulations and changes in data, it's quite difficult now. We had the opportunity to have a shopping basket. You had a lot of additional things that you could purchase. It worked pretty well, discount coupons and all sorts. I'm not a technology person, but if I was, I probably would have scaled that up to something much, because I just didn't feel for what we did there was actually anything out there. Now there's great choice, but it's about the hotelier and the market. It's also in bigger hotels, sometimes marketing and sales and management don't talk as well as they should, but actually it's very much that whole user journey, which starts when someone searches hotel in Boston to when they've left and receive a questionnaire afterwards and in between. And I think having that whole, understand that journey, and hotels are much better at it now, is what's really important. And that includes translation and technology and conversions and everything else. And, if people are going to spend money on translations in Italian and they hope they're going to get Italian business, there has to be more than just a translation on the website. Are you doing PR? Are you doing paid search? Do Italians even travel here? And I think because there's so much more data now and there's so much more data shared, I think that the hotel industry has realized that they've got to invest in themselves and invest in their understanding and their knowledge to make sure that what they do spend gets a better return.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point to make, that it has to be all stages along the buyer's journey. And I know there's a lot of tourism organizations in the United States that put it all out in English. And I know they're missing the international visitors, even though a lot are coming to certain cities around the States. Yeah. And what about the Google Translate plugin or machine translation? Where do you use that at all?
Yeah, we have it on certain sites, and I think where it's more transactional, I think that works fine. Again, it depends. Google Translate's got a lot better, but it's not perfect. And again, I think sometimes it depends on your price point. I think if people at a lower price point are probably more forgiving than people at a higher price point. If you're paying $100 a night, I won't use any brands, but $100 a night at a hotel on the motorway in the States compared to, maybe somewhere in Santa Monica, on the seafront, and that's $1,000 a night. If you are, a high net worth or a luxury traveler, and you've clicked on a button that says Italian and it's Spanish, you may be like, that's not very professional. And it's, again, going back to that customer journey. And so it's where it's best. I mean, obviously, a lot of hotels, particularly independent ones, cannot afford to translate into every language.
In
It'd
every
be a lot
language, yeah.
to do it live. Booking.com, or Priceline as it's known in the States, about 8 years ago had, I think it was something like between 500 and 1,000 translators around the world translating all of their pages live without translation to make sure that it all translated properly in all the content. And, they're, if not the biggest, they're one of the biggest, accommodation platforms for purchasing in the world. And, that helped them a lot because, they were fighting with Expedia to be number one. They did a lot of paid search aggressively against each other. And the better quality score you get, the lower, the lower the cost of that click. And translation is part of that. And therefore, they invested in content when it was still important for it to be more written than it was visual. And it seemed to, at that time, seemed to really work for them. And that translation piece became more important than just that Google Translate plugin.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting because I think the lower price hotels can't afford to translate in every language. But if you go back to know who your visitors are and you see that you have a lot of French and Spanish visitors, we'll take those two languages, build out a landing page, which is a few $100s, and then make sure your booking site is translated. You're going to beat the competition who just has the plugin in.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's we've done hotel marketing 101 here. But it makes a lot of sense. But a lot of, particularly in Europe, COVID's been really tough. Before that, a lot of costs increased. It's really tough running hotels today. It was tough when I did it, but I feel it's tougher now. Customer expectations are higher. Inflation has kicked in with electricity and gas and wages and everything else. It's hard to recruit, it's hard to retain. And the world's been a bit of a messy place. And therefore, often when there's a crisis, and this has been a long crisis for a lot of people, marketing is one of the first things people cut, which is madness, and training, which is also madness, which is why the hospitality sector is struggling globally post-pandemic, because some didn't market and a lot didn't retain and recruit and train staff. So it's probably no surprise, but it's kind of sad because it's, I've been to the States a lot this year, and a lot of hotels can't run at full capacity. They pretty much ask you to clean your own room, which from a sustainability point of view is probably right. But it's not what they want to offer. They can't offer anything else. And so sometimes I think all those crises means that, a small hotel goes, I've got too many things to worry about rather than translate to my website. Maybe they can't afford a marketing manager. Again, a small independent hotel here, maybe 40 or 50 rooms. In the States, it's probably 100 to 120. So a lot of it depends on scale and whether people or the owners really believe in investing in marketing and whether they see that they can get a return from it. And probably a lot have been burnt over the years by spending a lot of money on things and not really thinking it through, and therefore think, I'll just give it to an OTA. They'll sell it for me. I don't retain the guest and I have to pay commission, but I don't have a marketing manager who I don't know how to manage, or they won't waste my money, which I don't think ever really is a waste, but that's a perception that some people have.
Right. But and I think it goes back to understanding marketing and understanding how to manage someone and set goals and requirements around it. Yeah, I wrote a book on global marketing, and one of the examples I used in there was TripAdvisor, and this is back to the Google Translate, that they have a team of professionals that do the human translation for all the original content that they put out. They use translation memory, and they set up the format so it's always the same when somebody goes in to look at a listing. But then the customer reviews, they use Google Translate because that's just, there's so many reviews that are coming in all the time, and you can get the gist. Is it good or is it bad? Is what people are looking for. So I thought they had done a good job of being strategic about where they use translation.
Yeah, I think that probably came about from what Booking.com did, because they really, Booking.com really grew exponentially from 2007 to 2011 and 12. I mean, they're still very big, but there was this whole thing that it was and I've been fortunate enough to meet a few of the very senior staff there. Really smart marketing. They match it with, that you can rent an apartment, you can do hostels, you can do luxury hotels. Everything was on Booking.com, but a lot of people didn't really know the brand. A lot of affiliate schemes that they used, and they did a TV advert. And I remember I was obviously running hotels then, but they included hostels, they included yurts, they included everything, and it was like Booking.com, Booking.anywhere, and that was a big thing, because that was like, right, okay, and this was in every country around the world, major country around the world, and translated. So if you're going to spend all that money on a TV ad and people go to your website or your app, it needs to be a good user journey, and it's got to have that translation, particularly if you're doing a Spanish advert.
Right.
Sorry, frog in my throat.
Yeah. And it goes back to, what you said at the beginning is if you speak English, you just assume everybody's going to, but something like 7% of the global population is a native English speaker. And 90% of the people who are bilingual would rather have content in their native language. And if you're talking about something about booking, particularly travel or hospitality for pleasure, you've got to get that emotional side in there.
Yeah, no, and I think what individual hotels' website has an advantage over an aggregator like a TripAdvisor or Booking.com. Change things regularly. You can put personality to it. You can, particularly that luxury space, you can make it sing. You can make people dream. Yeah. And I think where people do, some of the luxury hotels we've worked with, and the Game Reserve, Virunga National Park, they've had some really bad PR because there's a lot of political issues in the Congo. But you see a photo of a gorilla in their jungle, it's amazing. Look, you're smiling. You didn't really see the photo. And so actually there's so much opportunity. There's a hotel I love in the Caribbean called the Sandpiper in Barbados, and they have some amazing drone footage. Or the barman called Harold, who does cocktails on the beach, and you just look at it, you feel warm. That's that dreaming stage that makes you want to dream, and that's one side of it. But when I travel to the universities in the States, often it's a very transactional thing. I look at price and location, and that's it. I just want it to be quick and easy. And I use one of the larger brands in the States. Obviously, we don't want to do plugs because that's unless you want plugs. But
it's up to you. If you like the brand and you want to plug them.
Okay, it was Marriott.
It was a good point program and frequent stayer, and so for business travel, it's great.
I do it through the app or the website. I can type in the name of the university, and it's there. It's just easy, and they recognise the loyalty of it as well. You can change it to local currencies. It's all simple. It's easy, and it's that whole, again, going back to that booking journey. For that transactional stay, I want it quick, I want it easy, I want to press a button, they've got my credit card details, I don't need to faff around with anything. I turn up in Atlanta at 11:30 at night, the key was ready for me, I went to my bed and I slept. There was no... When you go on a luxury holiday, or if you've got kids, or you've got a family trip, or you're going away for Thanksgiving, or whatever it may be, maybe it's a whole different experience. You want the faff, you want the cocktail when you check in, you want to be told when breakfast is or where it is, and all of the facilities, because you're there for a week or 2 weeks. But if you're staying somewhere for a night and you're at a certain price point, people just want simplicity.
Yeah.
And that's why the journey has to include the personal interaction in the hotel, and why I always felt it was important that the receptionist knew what we were doing with marketing. So it was all part of it. And also, if you're going to advertise a lot to Italian and Spanish, do you have Italian and Spanish speakers on the desk?
Yeah.
And that's what we always had. London's a great city for that. There's a lot of language spoken here.
Yes.
And so we would often have a team on the front desk. I think it was like 7 languages spoken or 8 languages spoken. So we were always able to communicate. One of the things we veered away from, partly because we would have to change our service so much, was the Chinese market. And a lot of hotels in London back in the late 2000s did a big push for Chinese travelers, a lot booked through travel agents, so it's less about your website. But internally in the hotel, you need Chinese staff, but you also needed Chinese menus and information in the rooms, potentially Chinese channels on the TV. all of that sort of stuff. And so, again, without sounding like a broken record, it's that whole customer journey piece. Is does it all fit together?
Right.
And it's all the way through. And then, trying to personalize it as much as possible.
Right. And I think that's what's so important too, when you're picking who you're going to do your translation with. Can they work with you on your strategy? Because the menu that you translate to give out in the restaurant, or, QR code, is the same menu that you can put up on your website. So you don't have to translate it twice. So work strategically to leverage that translation. We are running out of time, Steve. And so I wanted to ask you your favorite foreign word, because I always like to do that.
Well, it's my wife is Swedish, and there's a phrase, puss and kram, which means hug and kisses. Kisses.
Oh.
So yes. So her grandmother is 96 and doesn't speak huge amounts of English, and I don't speak huge amounts of Swedish, but we get by. And whenever I say goodbye, it's hej då and then puss and kram, and then you give her a hug and a kiss. So yeah.
Puss and kram.
It's not pronounced. There's a much better way of pronouncing it. My pronunciation is very, very bad. Yes.
Oh, that's great. All right. Any final recommendations for people in the hospitality doing international? And then where can people reach you if they're interested in working with you or learning more?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would just say is don't be scared of doing and trying stuff. I used to play quite a bit of sport, never quite that high level, but I had some pretty competitive coaches. And even today, everyone talks about marginal gains. You don't have to transform everything in one go. So a 1% improvement on direct business can actually pay for a lot of your marketing. And then you can slowly increment that. So I'd say focus on marginal gains rather than 100% improvement. And if people want to work with us, the website's umidigital.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Steve Lowy, and I'd be more than happy to connect.
Okay, so Umi Digital is spelled UMI. So the website's umidigital.com.uk.
.co.uk.
And then Stephen Lowy, Lowy on LinkedIn.
And Steve Lowy, because otherwise Stephen Lowy is the former CEO of Westfield Shopping Centres. So he probably doesn't want to talk to you about hotel marketing.
Okay, so look for Steve Lowy and type in Umi, UMI. Yeah. And thank you so much. I really appreciate talking to you. And yeah, Steve, I'll catch up with you later. I can see that my next call is, whoops, he just went away.
Cool. All right. Well, have a great Thanksgiving, and good luck with TK Maxx, and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Yeah. If I can ever help in any way, please let me know. Do you know anybody else that might be good to interview for the podcast?
I'll have a think. Think. I know some people who work in language travel, which might be particularly interesting for you. There's one guy in particular. So I'll see if he's interested.
Okay. Or any clients that are doing translation well and have a hotel property. That would be a really interesting one to follow up on this one.
Cool. All right. Well,
a tourism site. Yeah.
I'll ask around.
Okay.
I know a lot of people who do it badly, but you don't need to publish that.
I'm sorry, what?
I know a lot of people who do it badly, but maybe that's not the right audience. Not our clients, but yeah, a lot of big brands who do translation really, really badly. But
well, if you know anybody, we'll get them in, and I can give them suggestions. Yeah. Who do you use for your translation or for your client's translation?
We often push that a lot to the client and encourage them to do it. The reason being is when you're the middle person, excuse the phrase, lost in translation, but if it does go slightly squiffy, it's always our fault, not. And so over the years, I can't remember the name of the company, we used a quite large one for a while. And then we asked them to translate a legal document. And then I happened to have a native speaker of that. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, they'd got it completely wrong. And we paid a fortune for it. And so obviously we were like, right, okay, this needs to be we can introduce people, but like it's sometimes not for us to be involved. In London, a lot of the marketing teams will use people within the teams to translate because of the number. I mean, we had 40 nationalities in our hotel working there, so that will often be the way. And again, I don't know if someone's good at writing in Portuguese. You just have to hope they are. But yeah, I think.
All right,
certainly,
go back and listen to podcast episode number 4. Randy Roger talking about if you have your employees do the translation.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that hotels are on very tight margins, and even for translation companies, it's showing the benefit of it.
Yeah,
it's not. A lot of people say, well, Google Translate's fine, my hotel's full. So they don't see the long-term benefit of it. So I think that's all they'll put on Booking.com. And so I think it's important, but I think it's a lot of people have been burned in hotels, including myself. I mean, I had some dogs of people we work with technology and marketing and various other things. So cool.
All right.
Well, I'll keep you posted. And yeah, I was going to get to the other side of London for a dinner. But
for dinner. I'm just thinking about lunch.
Well,
this was really, really good. You really did a nice job of explaining it and clear and, thinking about that whole buyer's journey. And I sit on the multicultural board at the Greater Boston Convention and Visitor Bureau. So as I was listening to you, I'm like, oh, I'm going to send this over to their marketing person so they can use it and get it out to their members.
Thank you very much. And I hope the accent was okay.
I understood you enough.
Okay. No.
The spellings would have been really weird.
Okay. That's your fault, not ours. But anyway, good luck. I don't know if you follow soccer, but England are playing USA in the World Cup on Friday. So
what time is the game?
It's 7 p.m. UK time. So
perfect. Midday. Okay.
Yeah. Lunchtime when you're dealing with your food coma.
Yes. It's perfect. Yeah, that's wonderful. And please let me know if you get to Boston. It would be great to meet you.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.